What's Your Work Fit is sponsored by Hudson Davis. Start your brand's marketing and communications journey today at hudsondaviscommunications.com. I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit? So that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good May Day, everyone. How are you doing? This is Dan Smolin from What's Your Work Fit. It is so good to have you with us today. As I always say, we could not do this show, What's Your Work Fit, without all of you. Our audience is key to our success. I want to thank you for your efforts to help us build a following. And if you aren't a regular viewer of this show, or you're new to the show today and you haven't signed up, I'd like to point you to the platforms where we run live, and we also have pre-recorded content. You can find us on LinkedIn, on Facebook Live, and on the What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel. Hit the associated buttons to follow us, and that way you will be reminded of all new shows that come down the pike, and also get to see articles that we write and other content, including clips from our past shows. Really good stuff. One other question, or actually one other ask that I have, if you like the content that you get here on What's Your Work Fit, my simple ask is this: tell 5 friends to subscribe to What's Your Work Fit on the platform of their choice. We've built our following slowly but steadily, and we really have the greatest audience. And I thank you all for everything that you do to get the word out about What's Your Work Fit and help us create really great programming. Okay, we'll get right to it. I am so excited about today's show. Our guest is Ryan Anderson from MillerKnoll. How you doing, Ryan?
Good, my friend. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So Ryan is the VP of Research and Insights for MillerKnoll. And if you're not familiar with MillerKnoll, it is the OG of interior design for both homescapes and workscapes. I took some license with that. And as a point of privilege and a point of information about me, I grew up in a family furniture business in New Haven, Connecticut. My family's store, it was called Smolin's Contemporary Interiors, was among the first to carry what are now the MillerKnoll lines. We started with Herman Miller and Knoll, and that store in New Haven, and my memories of it are as a little kid. My family actually dissolved the business when I was 11 years old, but boy, it was like being in the Museum of Modern Art. It was a dreamscape. And so Herman Miller, Knoll, now MillerKnoll, was really a part of really my childhood. So I'm a bit of a fanboy, Ryan, and I thank you for joining us today.
Oh man, you were MillerKnoll before MillerKnoll existed. Amazing.
Yes, and I have to tell you, at one point in my early dreaming, I thought I was going to be an interior designer or an architect because of all the wonderful merchandise that I was surrounded by as a kid. It was like being in a candy store. The only thing is the candy was things like Barcelona chairs and ottomans, but really cool stuff. Awesome. Okay, let me introduce our co-host today. We have Mark Gilbreth from Liquid Space. How you doing, Mark? Looks like you're on. Looks like you're on mute. There you go.
Good morning. Great to see you, Ryan. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you, buddy.
And I'd like to introduce you all to Fran Saley, who really does some of the most amazing posts on LinkedIn about future of work and workplace and commercial real estate. How you doing, Fran?
I'm fine, Dan. Great to be with you and Ryan. It's great to have a visionary on the show today.
I think you got a few. Hey, Fran. Good to meet you.
Be with you.
So I am just going to get to the lead question, which the three of us brought to you several weeks ago, which is this: how can workplace design boost employee experience? So get us started, please, Ryan. How can workplace design boost employee experience?
Sure. And I'll try to keep my answer brief because I could talk about this one all day long. But it starts with the realization that our physical environments significantly affect our lives. So our research team, we're definitely looking at work and workplace, but we also look at clinical healthcare facilities, residences, higher education. Most people don't walk around realizing that the physical environments they're in are impacting their lives until it feels like the space is screwing something up. But when it comes to workplace, and I'll use workplace broadly. I'm talking office, I'm talking co-working, home workspace. There's a few different ways of thinking about it. I don't want to sound too academic here, but typically when we think about this, it has to do with how it affects us physically, cognitively, and socially. But I'll put that in a little bit more interesting language. So first would be our physical environments at work affect our bodies, right? Whether or not we're physically healthy and comfortable. And that's ergonomics, but it's also lighting and air quality and all these different facets because we spend such an extreme amount of time indoors in environments where we're working, and we're using tools that are getting more advanced, but also, you know, our hardware is getting smaller, our laptops, our mobile devices are transitioning with us. And so what it means is that people are spending more time on the move, transitioning between places, and often our physical bodies are not supported as well as we'd like. One of our brands, Herman Miller, has a work from home tool, wfh.hermanmiller.com. It's not a sales tool. It's just a tool to help people have better work from home experiences. But the last time I looked, we had about 34,000 people who responded. And I think about 60% said they were experiencing physical discomfort. A lot of it was back, shoulder, neck pain related to how we're sitting. But by and large, our spaces do affect our physical bodies. They also affect how we think and how we process information. This can be a lot of different things. If you've ever been in an environment where either it's like super overstimulated, where you're distracted, where you have trouble concentrating, that's an obvious one. But it actually goes a lot deeper. So if we think about like psychological comfort as an example, or psychological safety, that's the feeling like you have permission to share your ideas and your thoughts freely. Some of that relates to the people you're with. A lot of it relates to the people you're with. But a lot of it has to do with the space as well. There are things known as belonging cues, which convey to someone whether or not they really have agency or status in a space. I was at a meeting yesterday with a bunch of folks that I had just met at our local Chamber of Commerce here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We were in a space that was really well designed. Like the table was set up in a big square. It was nice and professional, but it didn't scream like hierarchy and status. The room did not convey that there was one person leading it. And you could just see like the ideas were flowing better than if we were in a space that conveyed that, no, there's a leader here, you're secondary. So there's a lot of different ways that these physical environments can affect our cognition or how we're thinking. Probably the one that I personally think most about is how it affects our relationships. And I know that's a weird thing, but our physical environments significantly impact how we relate with others, whether that's being alone and being able to be free of others, but also relates to how we interact with communities. I'm a big fan of this framework called Strong Ties, Weak Ties that came out of Stanford in 1973 from a guy named Mark Granovetter, that basically said that our networks consist of people that we're really close to. Those are our strong ties. Those are our families, friends, our closest coworkers. But then we've got all these extended relationships, which are our weak ties. And that's where we get a sense of safety and belonging and community. And we just went through, several years where we were very isolated from each other during the pandemic. You can see people gathering in physical environments, bars, coffee shops, event spaces to reconnect those weak ties, to spend quality time with each other. Our workspaces, if they're well designed, should be able to help you make new friends, strengthen relationships with people that you don't see a lot, have really good interpersonal experiences that feel like you belong, as well as provide opportunities to be with our strong ties, our team members that feel more immersive, less structured. But the emphasis is on good. If you were to think about spaces that really build those relationships, help us to think better, feel better, a lot of people would not think of the average office with a sea of desks and cubicles and meeting rooms. In fact, many might feel like those spaces are a hindrance to the things I just described. But if we do it right, these spaces can not only positively impact employee experience, they can positively impact organizational outcomes, because every outcome is dependent upon employees, right? Like that's how business gets stuff done. And so it's not just squishy feel good. This is how you equip communities of people to go be productive.
I want to go to we got a little echo here. I'm not really sure. I want to go to something I found on the MillerKnoll website, which was this: a global survey of desk-based workers shows that they expect flexibility in where 81% and when 93% they work. And when they get it, they feel more focused and productive. That really gets to the points you just made. But further, the vast majority, 85%, want the option to come to a physical workplace. I'm wondering if you could expand on this. And some of these ideas feel kind of contradictory, if you will.
Do they? Yeah, I'm happy to. So Future Forum was a collaboration between Slack, Boston Consulting Group, MillerKnoll, and a group called MLT. And we ran this project for a couple of years. We surveyed 10,000 people in 6 countries every quarter. These were desk-based workers, basically, traditionally what we would call office workers. But we were asking a lot of questions about their preference, their work style. And there's some really important things here. I'll start with the topic of flexibility. If we go back pre-pandemic, there was already ample evidence, like if you look at Gallup's State of the American Workplace, that flexibility was so important to employees and that many employers were just kind of missing the boat on it. Location flexibility has dominated the conversation. Do you want to be at home, the office? By the way, most people will say all the above, because most people prefer greater number of choices than fewer. But schedule flexibility was largely overlooked. Now, what does that mean? To some extent, that's working hours, but a lot of it is control over your calendar. Like, are you empowered to use your working time to do the things that you find to be most important to meet your goals, to accomplish your work? And people can feel sometimes very overscheduled, like other people are putting too much on their calendars. Maybe it's dominated by too many meetings or too many video meetings.
Right.
Or maybe it's just a situation where we've got a highly distributed team and they're forced to work certain hours of the day where they can't do certain work very well. One of the questions I love to ask people is, if you're going to read like a really dense, complex document, when do you do it? And it's really interesting because the answer is almost always very considerably. For me, it's early. Like I want that 8:30 maybe before I open up my inbox, basically. But I've heard other people say, no, I need to do that late at night after the kids are in bed, whatever. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can hinder schedule flexibility. But when we started asking people about their perceived productivity, and I'm someone that believes that you can't really effectively link productivity to a specific type of space. There's too many variables to be able to defend that, but you can ask people about their perceived productivity, which tells you something about their sense of achievement. Those with schedule flexibility listed their productivity much higher than those with just location flexibility. When it came to location, we asked people, do you want to be fully remote? Do you want to be full-time in the office? Do you prefer some sort of hybrid arrangement? The numbers broke down. 15%, this is a year ago, 15% wanted to be fully remote. 19% wanted to be fully in the office, and 66% preferred some sort of hybrid arrangement. And usually there were I believe there were some pretty specific reasons why somebody might fall either fully in the office or fully remote related to their working location, the specific work they do. Most people prefer greater choice.
Mhm.
And I think it's up to organizations to ensure that they're providing good choices. And those numbers kind of assume the status quo workplace.
Mm.
What I think is really interesting is when you start making improvements, either to home workspace or to corporate workspace, how that can change the equation. But I think what's happening, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, is that for organizations that have embraced hybrid policies, they're realizing that this has to be managed at a team level.
Mhm.
Very difficult to change work at an enterprise level.
Yes.
Too many organizations have kind of let it be a free-for-all for every employee, and it's just too disjointed. And so now I think what is happening across a lot of organizations is team leaders are saying, how are we doing? Are we feeling connected? Most employees will say probably not.
Mhm.
Can we spend better quality time together? Can it be purposeful? Can we still respect your desire for flexibility while spending more time, quality time together? And we're seeing increases of that in most parts of the world.
That's brilliant. Fran, lead us off, please.
Sure. Ryan, um, for 100 years, we were in the situation where the office and knowledge work were almost synonymous in terms of how we thought about it and what was going on there. And of course, as you mentioned, there's been this huge change in the last 4 years. And I think we're still in the blender trying to figure this out
The
in
blender.
terms of how we do what, where, when, and by whom, all that. But what I did find interesting the other day, about a few weeks ago, and we chatted briefly before the show about this, this article appeared in the journal that working from home could be great with these new features. Now, if you look at the graphic, which is a little small on the screen, I apologize for that. One thing I think they left out was a kitchen. So I'm not sure exactly how this home works, but they have a lot of other
It's
stuff.
all DoorDash at this point.
Could be. A lot of other stuff within the house that suggests that there is a future for residential environments to be a place where work can be done very efficiently in a situation where all the ergonomics around it and the furnishings and the technology will support that very nicely. So there is a huge opportunity there for growth. My question is, as we look at this kind of option, and of course there are other third spaces and flex and all that stuff. How do you see this evolving? I mean, you're thinking about this in terms of where your business is going. You have to have some sense of what you think would be the possibilities, and how would you rank those possibilities for our audience?
Yeah, I think this is.
Listen here.
Oh, sorry, I interrupted you. This to me is like one of the topics that I cannot believe has gotten more attention, and I'm so pleased you're bringing it up. And I'll share that work from home is not really new to us. Knoll and Herm Miller as brands supported work from home. In fact, Herm Miller launched the first desk in the Herm Miller portfolio in the 1940s called Executive Office Group as for home or the office, but it was called Executive Office Group because the only people that had that autonomy were the executives. But we've got access to all of our archival research. We did a project called Out of Office, looking at work from home in 1993 while I was still in university. So a lot of history here. We just finished some additional work from home research. I mentioned we've got this data from 34,000 users of our work from home tool, but we also did some ethnographic research studying 100 homes in, I think it was 7 countries over a period of 6 or 7 months. And the learnings were tremendous. And I just had a chance to share a little bit of this at an event called Running Remote last week. And this piece in the journal was like a really good preview for some of what we found. So to net it out, if you look at people working from home, that represents for most organizations 20, 40, 60, 80% of that employee's productivity and health if they're working in a hybrid environment. If they're fully remote, it's 100%. Organizations have done very little to ensure that people really are, in fact, healthy and productive working from home. Some have given a few stipends. Most haven't. Most have completely left it to chance, not thinking about the impact to that employee's productivity and the overall organizational outcomes. There's a handful of things that need to be addressed. One we talked about, which is just physical ergonomics and health. And that starts actually with just helping people to know how to be healthy. If you don't have a height adjustable desk like I do, I bet you have a kitchen counter, although apparently not in this graphic. But like, take that laptop, go stand up, move, spend 15 minutes, get moving. And then a lot of our research focused on key activities or different sort of work moments that could be better supported in existing parts of the home. So I mentioned reading a complex document. Don't do that at your desk if you've got Slack notifications in your face. Like, go find another part of the home that you might consider your reading zone. We talked a little bit about this idea of having a reference zone, really being intentional about organizing those sort of anticipated resources that you might need and making sure that they're there to help when you need it is it's a simple exercise. Usually it takes a few hours. Most people haven't done it. We like to think about how many people are using a given workspace. If there's a partner or a kid or somebody else who's also using that space for work or for homework or whatever, having a secondary area where two people can be on a Zoom meeting and not interfering with each other makes a ton of sense. Something as simple as, if there's multiple users, maybe don't go with the Aeron chair that has tons of individual adjustments. Go with the Cosm chair that adjusts with no adjustments, because you've got people moving through the space. It was such a broad array of things we found. And a lot of it started just with recognizing that the worker, the employee, is the designer. There's nobody else that's going to come through
I love that.
and help them figure out what to do at their home. But if you give them just a little bit of education and ask, what do you need to do in the course of a day? And where might you do this? And it's not just in your home, it's co-working, it's in the office, et cetera. What you're getting as a result are people that are taking more charge of their productivity and their environment, which I think is huge, but it's very rarely done.
Those are great concepts, and I'm sure they'll be developed and enhanced over time. We'll look forward to seeing more of that from you over time. Can we look at the flip side of this now? Now, in addition to the home kind of changing and adapting, what about the legacy office environment, which we all know pretty well, where most of it, or a good chunk of it, is in very large floor spaces, in very large buildings, in CBDs that all mostly have commutes to them, some reasonable, others very, very long. Those buildings aren't going anywhere. And yet the business of doing knowledge work is changing and adapting. And probably the biggest issue is the commute. So how, I know, everybody's supporting those office spaces because they're in leases and they're not going away. How are we going to transform our supporting office element, in addition to the third spaces and other remote spaces, to integrate well over time? And if I could ask a kind of a corollary question, if there was a neutron bomb available, which would demolish the entire legacy office inventory, 6.5 billion feet gone, how would we restack the types of workplaces which historically have occurred and which are still occurring within office buildings?
Great question. I just saw Oppenheimer finally for the first time. When you said that, it was like a very visceral.
That was not a neutron bomb, though.
I think if I start there, most organizations would end up with more highly distributed real estate portfolios that contained smaller but better individual spaces. Now, the overall portfolio might not actually be less, but what you tend to see is, if it's a large organization, they'll probably have these really, big spaces that have historically served as headquarters or other big regional centers, but their workforce has gotten more distributed. And that's probably, for me, like distributed work, the more interesting topic than remote, because distributed just means you're in more locations. You might be in offices, but if you've got people spread out all over the world, your spaces also need to be a bit more distributed. And so the future of these environments are really as distributed hubs for connection and allowing people to be able to get together and spend the time in physical space that they want to in a more distributed and more social way. Now, having said that, it's really tough to get from point A to point B. And a lot of organizations were a bit oversubscribed on real estate even before the pandemic. Oh, sorry. Got my dog barking here.
Somebody agrees with you.
Yeah, exactly. My dogs are usually really quiet. Something's triggered them.
You're not in the office. We figured that out.
Exactly. We just adopted a rescue pug, so now there's two
Oh,
of them, and they're having fun. If I need to close the door, I will. But
No.
yeah, I think if I were to ask the question, like you've got an existing portfolio, what to do with it? This is a tough answer, but it's an honest answer. And it's you need to begin to design with, not just for employees. And what that means is we need to have an understanding in a given location of who's using this space and the sort of experiences they're seeking. Now, I'll talk broadly for a minute. Generally, we see people seeking two experiences that are at polar opposite ends of a spectrum. And it's not an either or, they're seeking both. On one hand, they're seeking very social, interpersonal, community building experiences. And it has to do with the strong ties and weak ties that I mentioned before. If I go back to the Future Forum research, 74% of people said that's primarily what they were seeking.
Mhm.
On the other end of the spectrum is this need for much more focused, concentrated work, because our collaboration has largely increased in being asynchronous. So if we were to work on a spreadsheet together, we're not going to go in a room together. I need an hour and a half of focused, concentrative time. And my dogs on cue helped me make the point that 52% of people that use that work from home tool say their number one issue at home is focus.
Mhm.
In some cases, if you're later in your career stage and life stage and you've got a home with a spare bedroom, no problem. But if you're younger, you got roommates, you got young kids, you got an adopted pug, crappy Wi-Fi, leaf blower, a partner that hates you, whatever. Like there's a lot of reasons why people struggle at home. So when they're coming in, again, this is a generalization, but they're either seeking to really be in like less structured, more immersive, more content-rich time with team members and other teams. And then an hour later, I need 90 minutes to focus on this project. And a sea of desks and traditional conference rooms are generically sitting in the middle, not offering a great deal of value.
Mhm.
And so it starts with, in some cases, decommissioning some space, augmenting others with some of these improved experiences. Internal events spaces, like these very flexible forums, are one of the biggest areas of growth we've seen. People are like, hey, we got some extra real estate. Why would we ever do an offsite? Let's make all these on-sites. And then the people that are here, they'll get the experience of seeing others that are gathering in our spaces. We had one customer who literally, they had 5 floors. Their utilization was down a little bit. They moved everybody to 4 to increase that social density, turned the 5th floor into an event space. And then you're seeing more people, but you're also seeing new people. And I think that's really exciting. Now, Fran, I'll tell you one other thing, which might be a curveball. We surveyed 5,000 people in 9 countries in October. We're running the survey again here in a couple of weeks. And we asked them a variety of questions just about how they're working. One of the big surprises, and it's on MillerKnoll.com under Insights, is that for those that are coming into the office, commute, for the first time that we've measured it, does not appear to be having a big impact on the amount of time they're spending. But I have to qualify that.
Mm.
Those are the people that are in a hybrid arrangement, and we asked them, how much time do you spend in the office? 2.4 days per week was the answer. And how far are you from the office? If they were closer, would those numbers be higher? That's a good question. But today, the amount of time people are coming into the office is less dependent upon the commute. And I believe that's because there's a pretty clear set of reasons why people come in. They're either coming in to see somebody, or maybe they're being forced to come in. But like the variability that we saw in 2021 and 2022 of like, I guess I'll go in. I'm not really sure why I'm going in, but I guess I'll go in. And then I didn't really see so many people, so I'm not going to go in. I think we're past that. The patterns are established.
Right.
And so now it's time to try to impact those patterns through design, either design of the work or design of the space.
And just a quick follow-up, there was an article on Macy's, which I published this last week. The big headline, Macy's insists people back in the office or they're fired. And then if you read the detail, it says they want people to come in 2 days a week.
Yeah.
Right.
It's different.
And I could go on and on about this, but the ways that leaders communicate the value of being together or don't is so impactful. I put on LinkedIn, I don't know, 7 or 8 months ago, if you've had a great return to office, I want to hear about it. So talked with a bunch of organizations where it's gone well. Through our Future Forum work and some work with a guy named Dr. Nigel Osland, who's a sociologist in London, we had looked at other situations. What we found was that, and this won't surprise you, if employees feel like they're going to do the same activities in the office that they were going to do at home, and they're forced to go someplace less convenient because there's a lack of trust, then understandably, they'd be like, what the heck? But in other instances, if the message is around, I'm not sure the way we're working is optimal, and there's got to be better ways of spending quality time together while maintaining your flexibility. And in particular, if this was done at a team level, the results can be excellent. There was a bank in Omaha, of all places, that several thousand employees. They redid their entire building in the midst of the pandemic, which was risky, but they really engaged their employees and just said, we want the experiences you have here to be really positive. The employees were involved, not so much talking about the space, but talking about their work, what's going well, what's not. There was a mock-up of the space. They got a chance to provide feedback on it. By the time they started opening up those floors, they had excellent office utilization because the employees were quite engaged. I think they understood the space was for them. It wasn't an exercise in compliance or a lack of trust. It was a sincere desire to create a space that people would use and enjoy, and their return to office went really well. So a lot of this is just how the employees perceive the value or lack thereof of the environment.
Makes sense.
Let's get to Mark. What you got, Mark?
Ryan, MillerKnoll is the manufacturer of arguably the two most iconic chairs. One for office, one for home. The Eames Lounge at home and the Aeron chair at work. I think it was around 2017 when you guys had a marketing campaign that said something in effect of, "It's time to stand up," right? Get out of that chair. When you brought to market the first sort of smart height adjustable desk that would prompt you. I'm curious about what your research suggests today about the value of variety in place, and might it be time for us to beckon people to leave the building, not just stand up, but leave the building? Is too much home too much of a good thing? Is too much office too much of a good thing?
Yeah, we're back, I think, to an education and empowerment conversation, aren't we, around how individuals and teams can make the most of this. Yeah, that was an interesting time because the media was going crazy with the whole sitting is the new smoking, which is BS from a research standpoint. But I mean, if you're sitting on your couch all night long with a bag of chips, then it probably is. But people used to sit at their desks a whole lot longer in an era of desktop computing than what we've been doing lately. Our ergonomists have always used the phrase, your next posture is the best posture. Like, the body's designed to move. And so we want people to move. And yeah, we make great chairs, but like, the goal wasn't to have people sitting all day long. Variety is really important, but I think what we're seeing, Mark, is that any facility design, and I'm talking about the design of like your home office, your living room, your office, co-working, these are change management experiences, right? So like, when you're going to make a change, you're doing it for a reason. And it's amazing how often the people who are doing the work don't know the intent of the change. So I've seen organizations redesign their space, offer a wide variety of work settings within the office, ranging from study halls to cafes to intense project rooms and other spaces as an amenity for their employee, only for the employees to not realize that they have access, ownership, or that these spaces were designed with a certain intent. So I think being very intuitive in our design, almost like the consumerization of workplace design, so that people have this sense of, I know what that's for, it'll support my technology, I have access to it, I'm the owner, is really, really important. But like our team of strategists, so my team consists of researchers, but also workplace strategists and designers. We'll do like a change readiness workshop with a lot of our customers, just to say, you're investing so much time. Make sure that everybody knows how to take full advantage of all of the things that you're providing for them. And we're finding that it's more important than ever. It's not always intuitive. Inertia is a thing. We'll stick with the predictability. And the one other thing I'll add, this is a long answer, sorry, is that in the world of environmental psychology, there's this concept called place attachment, which is why we tend to sit at the same chair at the dining room table or the same seat at church or temple or wherever. Like, we grow attached. We form relationships with places. Because people have been working so much from home for the last few years, that's the place they're most attached to typically. It's almost like what we're really doing, Mark, is helping them to form new attachments with new places so that they have more options. But to suggest that it just happens on its own, It often doesn't.
And for the growing ranks of companies that are giving their employees more flexibility and location choice, there's this bright day in the sun now for the co-working and flexible office industry. It well and truly seems to be surging forward. What opportunities or challenges from either a change management standpoint or a workplace design and ergonomics standpoint does your team sort of see in that co-working and flexible office landscape?
Yeah, well, and you and I have been friends for a long time, so you know this, but we're big champions of flexible workspace options. That could be co-working. It could be more of an enterprise-focused, flexible arrangement. And I think we're going to see more and more of it because the process that we described with Fran of going from an existing portfolio to what you need to be is going to take some time. And so one use case would be and I should back up and say real estate strategy follows talent strategy. So if an organization finds that they've got 18 people in Poughkeepsie, New York, all of a sudden, I mean, they can go build out a space, but thinking about how to support those employees using co-working and flexible space to begin with, not only is great from a real estate agility standpoint, it allows you to basically begin to observe and work with groups to see what kind of work they're doing and what they need. Do they really need just a row of desks, or do they really need some sort of project room that everybody can live out of a couple of days a week? It depends on whether or not those employees work with each other or if they happen to do completely different work and just loved all being in the same city coincidentally. And so I think co-working, and as you know, I did a stint with WeWork, has historically been associated with come downtown, hang out with a bunch of people, not at your organization. It's a party and fun. And clearly that's not where the need is. Suburban, even rural, like the rural co-working trends we've seen in the UK and beyond, basically having space that's an alternative to home that isn't going to place a huge demand on you to get on a train or a car, that either allows you to connect with others in the area in a way that would be uncomfortable in your home, or to go do the sort of focused concentrative work that Griffin and Puggles here
or connect with colleagues that in a location that might be more proximate for the two of you or three of you or five of you than the commute to the office. Yeah.
And Liquid Space was on this a long time ago, but having that means of finding and navigating the choices that are out there has always been the challenge. Because you've got the big providers, but there's so many wonderful independent operators. There's one just around the block from me that solely focuses on accommodating the needs of professional women and working moms. That having tools to be able to say what spaces are available to me is really powerful, and I see a lot of growth in that area. What we've done is look at the designs of these sort of environments, ask the question, what could they be beyond a row of desks? Because not everybody just wants to rent a desk. And then the major area of late is around agility. What does it look like for these spaces to adapt with very little money and very little time, almost like an event space for the changing needs of individuals and groups? Because they do require a capital investment, often from an independent operator, and the use cases change. So the spaces need to get better over time and change with the user. That's true of all workspaces, by the way, but I think there's a particular burden on flexible workspace.
So I want to get to a few viewer questions. First off is Bill, who says, my company asked me, what would make my workplace experience better? And I said, ergonomic supportive seating. It's to the point you said before. I'm not asking for an Aeron chair, but that would be nice.
Yeah. Bill, first of all, take a moment to appreciate that your employer asked, because most don't. And it's true. When it comes to working from home, good desk seating continues to be the issue. And I know I'm super biased with this, but data from Leesman and others supports this as well. It's what supports our body a majority of the day. And actually, Mark, if you want me to find a coupon code, I bet I can. But having a good desk chair is really key. And like I said, there's chairs like Aeron that are designed to be super fine-tuned to an individual.
Right.
And then there's other chairs that are kind of more multi-user, but it's a big part of the issue. And so whether it's through a stipend, or we've got a couple customers that actually provide chair almost it's basically taxable income. It's like a gift. So you keep the chair, and yes, you're going to have to take a little bit of hit on your taxes because it counts as revenue. But finding a way of providing more support at work is usually, in the home workplace is usually a win-win.
You can't see it behind me because it's hiding all of my wife's shipping boxes, but I have an Eckernes stressless chair and ottoman behind me that got me through a lot of back problems in the agency days of my career.
Yeah.
I want to get to a really interesting question from CJ, who asks, how does MillerKnoll's research and insight reflect neurodivergency? This is a big topic we get about neurodiversity and neurodivergency. CJ manages a team of engineers, many who are neurodiverse, who could benefit from appropriate workplace enhancements. What are your thoughts on this?
Many. Our research into it goes back a long time. And for us, neurodivergence falls within a slightly even bigger topic around inclusive design. And it gets back to kind of what I was talking about before, designing with, not just for employees. So we've looked extensively at, yes, the needs of those on the neurodivergent spectrum, and that's autism, but it's a whole host of other things. Those with specific sensory needs. We've even done work, I know this is kind of a crazy thing to mention, we've even done work around the needs of women of menopausal age in the workforce, which has been a topic in the UK for a while. There's people that are experiencing anxiety at work. There's others that are experiencing any number of things that, if we take a moment to ask, where are the struggles? Like, what is it that you're finding hinders your experience, your productivity, allows us to then design better spaces. Now, on the topic of neurodivergence, I'm going to try to not get too into interior design theory here for a minute, but there tends to be a desire for either hypo or hypersensitive environments, meaning spaces that provide very little stimulus, quiet, focus, and it's pretty common to see people unscrewing the lamps, the light bulbs above their desk to try to be able to reduce the sensory input to focus. Then there's others on the neurodivergent spectrum that really respond very positively to some buzz, some energy, and some noise. So choice is good. The ideal situation is giving people maybe a couple different environments to work from. But if we're talking about assigned desking, I strongly recommend having a quick conversation with the team and saying, do you feel like the environments allow you to focus and concentrate? Is it too quiet? Is it too loud? What are those distractions? And then we can provide some specific recommendations for the design of the space. But I'll give you one quick anecdote. We designed within Herman Miller height adjustable desk called Renew back in 2015 or 16. And one of the things we do is we go to our business resource groups, our employee resource groups, and we ask them for input on designs. And almost every organization has them, some for veterans, women, disability, whatever. And so one of the things we learned about height adjustable tables is that the controls for them are sometimes difficult for someone who's on the neurodivergent spectrum or have other limitations. So if you take a look at a sit-stand table, it's got like a little paddle. There's a couple of arrows. If you don't have good visual acuity, you might not be able to see those arrows. If you don't have good fine motor skills, you might not be able to hit them easily. But those that specifically were on the autism spectrum, we found that there's a little bit of latency. Like when a sit-stand desk hasn't been operated for a little while, the motor cools down, and when you hit it, there's maybe a couple of seconds until it moves. And the designer of this product, Brian Alexander, who himself is neurodivergent and talks about it, said, we've got to overcome this. So it was so simple. We designed this little polypropylene clear adjustment, or it's kind of frosted. And you don't have to look at it to hit it, but it's got a little embedded LED light. And if you push it, the light immediately sends you a signal. You're good. So even if the table takes a second, and like with many things with inclusive design, this would be true of the OXO Good Grips peeler, other examples. We released that product, and it only took a few months before people wanted that adjustment on all of our tables. And so I think the principle here is, let's include people that have unique needs in the design process. We don't necessarily have to ask them what color paint they want, but if we just ask them about their experience, it provides us the basis for improving it. And I don't remember who asked the question. I think it might have been CJ, but if you want one of our strategists to have a conversation with you, I'm happy to accommodate it. Just hit me up on LinkedIn.
Very good. We're running a little short on time, so I want to go to Fran.
So dang much.
Oh no. Well, we'll have you back at a future point to continue. Fran, let's go, and then we'll go to Mark.
Okay, great. Ryan, you've had the benefit of being in the equipment and furniture business with occupiers for a fairly long time. before the pandemic and now 4 years of post-pandemic. Can you give us some insight into how those relationships between corporate real estate, interior planners, senior leadership within company, how those relationships have changed, and how do you feel those people are doing today? I mean, has this become a much more anxious activity within the business? And
Well,
give us some insight there.
I definitely think there's risk, right? So there you can sense the risk on the corporate real estate team's face. They're like, oh gosh, are we making the right investment? Does this investment make sense? I host our podcast, which is called About Place, and we had Matt Boyle, who leads the future of work reporting for Bloomberg, on last season, and he said something to the equivalent of a black eye in real estate lasts 10 years because that's the likelihood. So you get that kind of vibe sometimes, but I think there's a different issue, which is listen to like the conversations we've had. You can't really solve this by going and just doing a project where we're going to redo 2 floors if your portfolio is big. So a lot of the time what they're looking to do is to make incremental improvements to their spaces overall. So I got this amount of capital, this amount of spaces. Sometimes I'll say, we'll help you invest the least to make your spaces, the most better. That's bad grammar. You get what I'm talking about here. Yeah. And so it means that commercial real estate folks, I see Marissa Huber on the call. She's one of the best. Interior designers and others might not need to think in terms of like this project anymore. It's more about the evolution of a portfolio. Mm-hmm. And so that impacts how deals are structured. It impacts how those relationships are formed. I've got a team that spends a lot of time with accounts just long term, just asking the question, like, what does this look like? How might we pilot a few things? And there's a lot of emphasis on sharing good case studies that work because, and I want to be careful how I frame this, but a lot of workplace design now and historically has been built on speculation. This is what our people need.
Oh,
There's senior person in the company that's like, yeah, that's what our people need. Well, if you ask me how my team works, I'd say go ask them. How the hell am I supposed to know how they work? It's evolving, and so you're going to spend millions or collectively billions and trillions on the speculation either of a senior leader who doesn't really know a lot about those work processes, or what is just considered to be like best practice. That I don't think that works anymore. You can't just copy and paste floor plans from a fintech company in Copenhagen to a consulting firm in the Bay Area. So it means that collectively we need to get together and say, who are we helping, engage them. And I don't like to necessarily encourage organizations to ask their employees about the space. Don't ask them about what they want in the space. Just how are you working? How is it different than 2019? What experiences are well supported? What's not well supported? When you feel like you need to leave the space to do something, why? What is it you're trying to do? That provides the basis for like, okay, I think we know how to enhance this space the most. And there are some organizations that are being really successful with it, but it is still, particularly for large organizations, still somewhat nascent.
Great.
Mark, finish us up.
Ryan, you've spent a lot of time thinking about technology in the workplace, even working for technology companies that help people get to the workplace. I'd like to go back to your comment earlier in our conversation today, where you brought up the term belonging cues, which I find super tantalizing. I can relate to belonging cues in terms of the design of the physical office, such that when I arrive, when I'm mandated to do so Monday to Friday, I can find the place, or elements of it will draw me in. I'll have a visceral sense of belonging from what I see as I prospect visually across the workplace. I'm curious what's needed, and perhaps what's needed from technology to communicate a belonging cue if the person that's considering do I belong or not is at home and contemplating the decision of whether they're going to venture to the office this week or next week, where it's elective, not assumed that they're going to be there.
Right.
Is there a job to be done, or a problem to solve there in terms of technology fix?
Oh, I'm like Tim Gunn, edit. I could talk about this for hours because it's been so much of my career. So I'll just land on a couple of basic principles. Office design was primarily driven by IT networks for a really long time. You laid out the desk to support a desktop computer. You got the wires from the closet, and the people is like plunk. They're just in there at the end. There's still a mindset among too many folks in the real estate, AV, interior design world that you design the space, you place the technology, and then someone comes along. The better mindset is we're all mobile. The work is digitized. Like, forget about remote. All of our work increasingly is becoming virtualized. It's dematerialized. Not everything, but most of it. And so we travel through these spaces with what's in our pockets, backpacks, purses, and we have to be able to take those tools out and instantly have them be supported. And so what that means is make the spaces intuitive, design a space asking the question, what are people doing with their technology here? Like, oh, we've gone to Miro instead of using physical whiteboards. Can they use it in a room? Sure, but you're going to need a bigger display because that content's really detailed. And you're probably going to need the ability to have people array around it differently. It's all about those use patterns. And I'll say very specifically, I'm asked so often about hybrid meeting rooms, which when I ask, like, what's a hybrid meeting room? Well, that's a meeting room where not everyone's in the meeting in the room. Well, that's just a meeting room. We did a project with the head of user experience at Microsoft pre-pandemic that laid out a series of principles around creating better spaces that I find to be equally true today. It's simple things. Don't have people all sitting shoulder to shoulder staring at a screen because they might want to look at each other. Likewise, don't have the remote participant looking down a bowling alley of people that are all staring at each other. We like guitar pick or trapezoid or other tables that allow people to make equal eye contact with remote and co-located folks. Put the camera the right height, the right distance. Think about background. I mean, it's not rocket science, but I will also say that even flipping through like Interior Design Magazine, I'm shocked at how rarely some of those principles are implemented even in the best spaces. So the good news, Mark, is that I think if we take a mobile first approach to thinking about user experience and we think about accommodating these activities, most of it is known. It's just rarely really implemented well. I went long with that one. I can keep going. But yeah, it's about the people and their patterns. How's that? Not just the tech.
You know, sadly, we are at the end of the show. I got to wrap things up. Can we get you back at a future point? You're like you're like the coolest professor. You know, you're just a font of information about workplace. And I'm speaking for my partners here. Truly enjoyable. Thank you so much, Ryan. Before we get to our final question, I just want to point our viewers and listeners to you so that they can learn more about you and perhaps engage you in dialogue. How could they do that?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow, connect, whatever you prefer. I have an amazing set of marketing friends who put tons of our work on MillerKnoll.com under Insights. You'll find most of what we've talked about is represented there. And finally, I host our podcast. We're just about to launch season 4 here in the next month or so. We just renamed it. It's called About Place. Had some of the most brilliant minds I know, although there's a few here on this call that I think I need to include. And it's our way of just taking our thought partners, and we do so much in collaboration with other brilliant folks and bringing them. But what you get is my nickel commentary and thoughts on what we're sharing. And we're actively involved in recording season 4 right now. So that'll launch soon.
We're going to include a button on our show notes so that people can find About Face. Cool name for a podcast. Well done. Okay, we're at the end here, and I'm going to ask you the question we ask all our guests, which is, what's your work fit? So, Ryan, what attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes work a wonderful part of your day, doing many wonderful and meaningful things, and not the all-consuming time suck of a day? What's your work fit?
Well, I'm going real high level with my answer. I hope that's okay. And my answer is theory Y. So for those that know Douglas McGregor's framework, he was a social scientist that basically said organizations operate in one of two ways. Theory X organizations think employees don't really want to do their work, and the job of management is to make sure they're working. Theory Y is that organizations view that their employees want to be productive and achieve, and the job of the manager is to empower. And so my favorite moments, and I'm almost my entire career, I've been so blessed to work for organizations that are Theory Y, relate to allowing like my team members or having the people that I work for enable me to go do what we dream of doing with that kind of support. And I'm really fortunate. I've got a dream job. I work for a Theory Y organization that values insights, doesn't censor or edit what I share, but just wants to make our places better.
And you got the coolest furnishings on the planet.
I know. I'm going to add womb chair, by the way, to that list, Mark. Like that's the one I'm pining for right now, an old womb chair. So that might be on my Christmas list.
My brother has an old Arne Jacobsen egg chair. And
Classic.
it still has the serial number on the bottom. Anyway, I got a little.
We're really fortunate to own Design Within Reach because even the stuff that we don't make, we can still.
That's so cool. Stick around, Ryan. Fran's getting the beverage cart ready. Thank you so much. We'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Thank you, Fran.
Thanks very much, Ryan. It's a great show.
Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it.